Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is a presentation by Dr. Ndlovu. The title of my presentation is a case for a specialized Ndebele terms legal dictionary. As way of introduction, the objectives of my presentation are as follows. The first objective, I want to argue and lobby for the compilation of a specialized Ndebele legal terms dictionary, which I consider to be a very useful aid for court interpreters in Zimbabwe. My second key argument in this particular presentation is to say that it is also important to factor in policy developments as possible guides or reasons for lobbying for a particular dictionary project, especially given the symbiotic and dialectic relationship between language policy, lexicography, translation, and interpretation. As way of background and context to this particular presentation, research has shown that specialized legal terms dictionaries are some of the most important aids for court interpreters, and an interpreter who does not consult one when in doubt is either arrogant or ignorant, or is a case of both in one individual. Currently in Zimbabwe, especially Zimbabwe and Ndebele, so to speak, there are no specialized legal terms dictionary which can be useful aids for court interpreters. This is despite the long history of court interpreting and lexicography as professions and disciplines in Zimbabwe. This is also despite the fact that Zimbabwe was among the first few countries in the continent and in the region to establish a dedicated lexicography unit. As we speak and as things stand, there is only one monolingual general purpose dictionary, Ndebele, one specialized musical terms dictionary, and one bilingual dictionary, a practical Ndebele dictionary by Helling. This limited number of reference works or materials makes clear for us the gap which must be attended to, especially in the work of the somewhat enabling language provisions of the 2013 Constitution of Zimbabwe, Amendment Number 20 Act. The Constitution in question, that is the 2013 Constitution of Zimbabwe, Amendment Number 20 Act, champions the right of access to justice in one's preferred language, Section 70. Its provisions have, to a larger extent, stimulated advocacy and lobbying activities for the right to an interpreter right from the point of arrest. And this has seen calls for the need to amend Section 50 of our Constitution in order to guarantee the right to an interpreter during arrest, investigation, and detention. And all these major policy developments create a fertile ground for language mediation within the justice system. And for this to be effectively done, there is need for useful aids which interpreters can rely on in the form of these legal terms dictionary in isiNdebele. We are saying that the current constitution is providing a somewhat enabling policy environment which creates or makes us make a case for the compilation of a Ndebele legal terms dictionary, which will facilitate multilingual service provision within the justice system where isiNdebele is involved. Given this policy development in Zimbabwe, where we have a language policy which to some extent, guarantees access to justice in isiNdebele, we are therefore saying it is not out of line, really, to argue and lobby for the compilation of a specialized Ndebele legal terms dictionary, which I'm considering that is going to be a very useful aid for court interpreters who are operating in isiNdebele. I'm fully aware and I appreciate that when dictionaries are compiled, the user needs paradigm stresses that the compilation of dictionaries should be inspired and guided by user needs. It's an established fact. It is very true that it is the user needs and the user perspective that should guide and inspire dictionary projects. But in this particular presentation, given these policy developments and observation in Zimbabwe, I want to put an argument that says In addition to being guided by user needs, being inspired by user needs, it is also important that we also factor in policy developments as possible guides and reasons for arguing for a particular dictionary project, especially given that there is a symbiotic relationship between language policy, lexicography, translation, and interpreting, which for me are key language planning implementation mechanisms. So I'm actually saying that even in context where dictionary culture is very poor, in cases where users can be ignorant or arrogant, or both in as far as the value of a dictionary is concerned, policy developments in such settings should, be used as sources of inspiration or as compelling reasons for investing in a particular dictionary project. I appreciate, ladies and gentlemen, that it is important that we are guided by user needs in compiling dictionaries or making a case for a particular dictionary. But I'm also saying that in contexts where dictionary culture is very poor, in contexts where users are ignorant of the value of a dictionary, yet there are policy documents that actually make it clear that there is need for people to compile dictionary projects that will come in handy to effectively implement and speak to the policy developments that are happening. I also think that we also need to factor in the policy development as one key inspiration for compiling dictionaries. Actually saying that when such is done, the compilation of such reference materials will then be useful in cultivating, ingraining, enhancing, and entrenching dictionary culture. We are saying that we are existing in contexts, in environments where dictionary culture is very low or non-existent, but there are compelling policy developments that make clear the need for us to compile and respond positively by developing such useful resource materials. But our users' needs cannot guide us in such projects. So what we will then have to use is to say that we are going to benchmark using the needs of users in a similar category to develop a resource material for the users whom we have said their culture of using dictionaries is non-existent, but there is actually a need for them to use one. So we are saying that once those materials are in place, this will be a useful way of then cultivating, ingraining, enhancing, or entrenching that culture of using the dictionaries. So in essence, I'm saying that at a theoretical level, in terms of contribution, I'm therefore arguing that policy developments are also useful justifications for arguing for specific dictionary types, especially in contexts where dictionary culture is poor, if not non-existent. In terms of my methodology, I employed a multi-method approach where I employed critical discourse analysis of the provisions of the policy documents which regulate language use in the Zimbabwean justice system, just to ascertain the policy position on language mediation, to check if whether it's really making a case or is useful to use as a case for justifying a dictionary project of the kind that I'm putting forward. And then I also employed interviews, the practicing court interpreters, both trained and untrained interpreters, because we are coming from a dispensation where most of our practicing interpreters were not trained in interpreting. They were employed largely on the basis of being bilinguals. I also conducted interviews, the honors and diploma in translation and interpretation students who were on industrial attachment, and some were actually coming from attachment, so that I could just get a picture from them, since they've gone through training, whether they see the need for such materials. And these are students who have also done the course lexicography. They've been introduced to the key issues around translation and interpretation. And part of my data came from observations of the practice of language mediators in as far as their need for such resources is concerned. In terms of findings, what I picked, especially with interviews from practicing court interpreters who unfortunately were not trained, what really came out from these interactions and engagements, that the majority of these untrained interpreters lack an appreciation of the value of dictionaries in their line of duty. And this again dovetails with our earlier observations with Professor Nkomo, that most people who have not been trained in dictionary pedagogy seem to lack this appreciation. They don't see the value of having dictionaries in their own mother tongue as they execute their own tasks. And again, this is a confirmation of these findings by Rigol and Cave in 2014, that an interpreter who does not consult a dictionary when in doubt is either arrogant or ignorant, or it's a case of both in one particular individual. And for us, their lack of training is a reflection of the ignorance, not necessarily arrogance, as it were. These are people who have not really been trained on dictionary pedagogy, who have not been really trained as interpreters to see what resources they need for them to effectively execute their tasks. However, interviews with honors and diploma in translation and interpreting studies, students who were on attachment and those who were coming from attachment made very clear this dire need for such a reference material or such a reference work. It emerged from them that indeed there is such a gap that as a nation we need to address, especially given that the current language policy provisions are actually, promoting language mediation, and as such, for them as interpreters in the making to effectively execute their tasks, they will certainly need such reference materials. And my observations when I, do court observations just for learning purposes, as part of my classroom or lecture room activities, as part of student assessment during attachment, I have seen that our interpreters need such resources. Their interpretation can be improved if there is reference to such authoritative materials that could actually assist, even in terms of standardizing some of the terms that are used within this particular domain, because in some cases, some of the terms that are being used, there is no standardization. Each person uses the term as they see fit and as they, please. And if such materials are in place, this will actually facilitate the standardization of these terms. This will even assist in the creation of terms that can come in handy in addressing these particular challenges. As such, given these observations from trained language mediators and from the compelling provisions of the new constitution, that we need to have such materials for us to effectively, provide language mediation service in the justice system, we felt it is imperative that, we develop a Ndebele legal terms dictionary. And the question could be, why is Ndebele out of the 16 officially recognized languages of Zimbabwe? I'm choosing Ndebele because, number one, it is considered as one of the major languages of Zimbabwe, and it is, of course, one of the officially recognized languages which is used in courts mainly in the following provinces: in Bulawayo, Midlands, Matabele, South, and North. And given this huge market for such a dictionary, I felt, starting with this Ndebele will be, of note and of an advantage. And then the other second reason is that Ndebele is generally considered the lingua franca of the aforementioned provinces, and as such, there is such a large number of potential target users for this proposed dictionary project. And the other compelling reason why Ndebele is that this language already has a sizable corpus that was developed by the African Languages Research Institute, and of note, it already has, a general purpose monolingual dictionary, which for me constitutes a very useful starting point for the compilation of other dictionary types. And the other reason is that we already have readily available experts in Ndebele and to some extent in lexicography, who, of course, part of the reason why I'm giving this presentation in this particular conference is to, create awareness to the board to say that these are some of the areas that you can consider, for training purposes to members. We are proposing this project. We have been trained in lexicography, but we need some refresher courses so that we embrace these 21st approaches to undertake this particular task. So this is an idea that I'm selling to the board. I'm aware that as AfriLex, we usually have workshops to members of the association, and I'm saying we have this gap and we have this cry as members in Zimbabwe, specifically in Ndebele, would really want to be retooled and retrained so that as we compile this proposed dictionary, we are aligned or in line with the 21st approaches for dictionary compilation. We are also saying that this particular proposed dictionary will employ the mixed approach, where we are going to employ the intuitive approach, the corpus-based approach, and we are going to complement these approaches so that the limitations and the weakness of the other method taken care of by the use of both methods or approaches. We cannot exclusively rely on the corpus because the corpus that is available is not representative and balanced. Number one, we cannot also exclusively rely on the intuitive approach because this is a traditional approach to lexicography. At least as a compromise, we'll embrace the mixed approach where these two are going to be used together. And we are also saying that, I know most people would laugh at hearing this, this particular project will be in print form because our preliminary research findings of this study show that the current target users are not yet ready really for e-dictionaries due to low dictionary culture, despite the fact that we are dealing with ICT compliant target users. And part of it really stems from our lack of resources to go in terms of developing these dictionaries. And again, this is a plea and a call to our colleagues and members in the field. Part of this particular program is to identify partners who can partner with us as a department in terms of really retooling and training us in areas of e-lexicography in the country. So this is a gap that we have, and we hope the board is noting some of these challenges that as members we are facing, and in future as you roll out some of these training programs, we are some of those people who are really looking forward to being recipients of such wonderful initiatives. So in essence, ladies and gentlemen, the argument that I'm putting forward during this particular conference is to say that in as much as it is true and widely acceptable that user needs guide and inspire and are useful justifications for compilation of certain dictionary projects, I'm actually presenting an added dimension to this to say that we also need to factor in and consider policy developments as useful guides and reasons for lobbying for particular dictionary projects, especially given that we exist in an environment or in context where dictionary culture is very poor or non-existent. So what we then need to do, we will use or benchmark using user needs of target users in other contexts where dictionary culture is already developed. And we are hoping that the projects that we are going to be developing will then help us, entrench and cultivate this particular culture of using dictionaries. And we are saying that once these products are on the market and are available, this could be a way of actually developing the said culture of using dictionaries. So on that particular note, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just saying that let's also consider policy developments as critical in terms of justifying for certain dictionary projects. On that particular note, ladies and gentlemen, I'm concluding my presentation. Thank you very much.